All right, so are you ready to dive into something we all kind of experience? Taxi conversations.
Oh, yeah.
I'm talking about those like quick little chats you have with the driver, right? Especially if you're in like a new city or a new country.
Yeah,
And you ever get that feeling of, oh no, what do I say?
definitely.
We're going to help you navigate those.
Yes. Make those chats smoother,
Yeah,
more confident. And in English, of course.
of course. In English.
Yes.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How those like seemingly small interactions can feel really significant.
Oh, they do. Yeah. You're in a new place, maybe a bit tired from travel,
Yeah, yeah.
and suddenly you're trying to make small talk.
Right.
But these conversations are more than just filling the silence. It's a chance to connect with someone, get some local insights,
Absolutely.
maybe even learn a thing or two.
Totally. Like it's a microcosm of cultural exchange,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
all happening like within a 15-minute ride. So where do we even begin? Like, let's say you just hopped into a taxi. What's the first step to like striking up a conversation without sounding like you're reciting a textbook?
Well, think of it like any other interaction,
Yeah.
right? A simple, genuine greeting
Right.
is always a great starting point. So a friendly good morning or good evening
Mm-hmm.
to acknowledge the driver,
Right.
right? It goes a long way, shows you're open to a chat,
Exactly.
even if it's a brief one.
Yeah. But what about those times when you want to go beyond just a simple hello? How do you like get the ball rolling
Yeah.
without feeling awkward? What's your like go-to icebreaker?
You'd be surprised how often just a simple comment about the weather works wonders.
Really?
Yeah, just something like, wow, it's really sunny out today, isn't it? Or the rain doesn't seem to be letting up.
Yeah.
Can be a great way to just ease into conversation.
I see how that works. It's neutral territory.
Yeah.
Everyone can relate to it.
Right.
It doesn't pry into any like personal details right out the bat.
Yeah.
So why is like a comment on the weather like
Yeah.
particularly effective in English-speaking cultures?
It's partly because it's considered, polite small talk.
Mm,
It shows you're acknowledging the shared experience of the moment without getting too personal too quickly.
right.
It's a way to test the conversational waters, so to speak.
Okay. So the ice is broken. You've
Yeah.
exchanged a few pleasantries about the sunshine or, lack thereof. Now what? How do you keep the conversation flowing without sounding like you're interrogating the driver?
Well, there's a natural progression to these conversations. You're in a taxi, so talking about the journey itself is a good place to start.
Okay.
Simple question, like, how long do you think it'll take to get to your destination,
Right.
is both practical
Yeah.
and a way to show you're engaged.
Right. Because you're not just a passenger. You're actively participating.
Exactly.
And it opens the door for the driver to share some local insights.
Yes.
Maybe a shortcut they know. Or like a heads up about traffic.
Yeah, exactly.
What other, I bet there are some clever ways to keep that conversational momentum going.
Absolutely. Once you've established your destination, you can follow up with a phrase like, I'm really looking forward to seeing mention a landmark or reason for visiting.
Oh, okay.
This adds a bit of context to your trip,
Yeah.
and it signals you're open to further conversation.
Right. It's like you're subtly inviting them to be your temporary tour guide.
Exactly.
But let's be real for a second.
Yeah.
What about those moments when you just draw a blank?
Right.
You've exhausted the weather talk.
Yeah.
Your mind goes blank. What's your advice for those conversational roadblocks?
Don't panic.
Okay.
Those pauses are perfectly normal.
Okay.
One strategy is to gently redirect the conversation back to the driver.
Okay.
So you could say something like, have you been driving in the city for a long time?
Okay.
Or do you enjoy driving?
Mm.
This shows genuine interest and
Yeah.
gives them a chance to share their perspective.
I love that. Takes the pressure off of you to come up with like brilliant conversation starters
Yeah.
and allows for more natural exchange. But we also need to be mindful of not crossing any cultural boundaries, right?
Yes.
Are there any conversational no-go zones we should be aware of, especially when, like, chatting with a taxi driver in an English-speaking country?
You've hit a crucial point.
Okay.
What might be considered polite conversation in one culture
Right.
could be seen as intrusive
Yeah.
or inappropriate in another. For instance, in many English-speaking cultures, asking about someone's age, especially a woman's, is considered a major faux pas.
Okay.
It's best to steer clear of personal questions like that unless the driver brings it up first.
Okay. So age is off limits.
Yeah.
Are there any other topics we should avoid to ensure the conversation remains, like, respectful lighthearted.
Definitely. Questions about income or relationship status
No.
are also generally considered taboo.
Okay.
Remember, the goal is to have a pleasant chat,
Right.
not to make the driver feel uncomfortable. Yeah. Keeping the conversation focused on, neutral topics like the city, landmarks, or even, we're back to the weather is a safe bet.
So we've covered like the do's and don'ts of initiating conversation, keeping it flowing, and staying culturally sensitive.
Mhm.
How do we make sure we sound natural and confident, not like we're like reading from a phrase book?
That's where those politeness power-ups come in.
Oh,
Sprinkling in phrases like, if you don't mind me saying, don't get me wrong, or just out of curiosity, can make your English sound more nuanced and native-like.
oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah,
It's like adding a touch of finesse to your English.
exactly.
Those phrases kind of soften your tone and make you sound more considerate.
Yes,
It's all about striking that balance between being like friendly and respectful.
precisely. And the beauty of these phrases is that they're incredibly versatile.
Yeah.
You can use them in various situations, not just in taxi conversations.
All right, I'm already feeling more confident about those taxi chats. You know what would really help solidify these tips?
What's that?
A real life example.
Okay.
Maybe we can walk through like a hypothetical taxi ride scenario
All right, yeah.
to see how all these conversational strategies play out in action.
I like where your head's at. Let's do it. Imagine you've just arrived in London
Oh, yeah.
and you're heading to your hotel
Okay.
in the heart of the city. The taxi pulls up, you hop in, and
Oh, I can't wait to hear how this unfolds.
all
I'm
right.
so excited.
All right, so picture this. You've just landed at Heathrow, bags collected, and you're ready to head to your hotel. You hop into a classic black cab, that quintessential London experience.
Ah, I love those black cabs. Okay, so I'm settled in the back seat, a bit jet lagged, but excited to be in London. What happens next? Does the driver just take off in silence?
Not at all. Most London cabbies are known for being quite chatty. You might hear, "Afternoon, governor, where to?" That governor bit is a friendly, informal term often used in London.
Oh, that's interesting. So right away, there's a bit of local flavor in the greeting.
Exactly. Now, you could simply state your destination, the Dorchester Hotel, please.
Right.
But remember, we want to make this a conversation, not just a transaction.
Right. So how do I build on that basic information and make it more engaging?
You could add something like, "It's my first time in London, and I'm really looking forward to exploring the city." That simple statement opens up several conversational avenues.
I see what you mean. That driver might ask about where you're from, what brings you to London, or even offer some suggestions for sightseeing.
Precisely. And let's say the driver responds with, "First time in London, eh? Well, you've picked a fantastic time to visit. The weather's been brilliant."
Okay, so now the driver's engaged and the conversation's flowing naturally. What's a good way to keep it going without sounding like I'm interviewing them?
Remember those indirect questions we talked about? Here's where they shine instead of asking, "What are the best sights to see?" You could try. If you had a friend visiting London for the first time, where would you recommend they go?
Ah, that's clever. It sounds more like a casual conversation than a barrage of questions. And it invites the driver to share their personal perspective, which is always more interesting.
Exactly. And let's say, just as you're approaching a particularly impressive landmark, you want to express your admiration.
Okay, I'm picturing Big Ben. It's my first time seeing it in person, and I'm totally awestruck.
Instead of simply exclaiming, "Wow," try something like, "I've always wanted to see Big Ben in person. It's even more impressive than I imagined."
That does sound more polished. It shows that I'm not just passively observing, but that I'm genuinely engaged with my surroundings, and hopefully the driver will share some interesting facts or anecdotes about Big Ben.
Exactly. Now imagine the ride is coming to an end and you want to make sure you part ways on a positive note.
Right, because even those short taxi rides can leave a lasting impression.
Absolutely. So as you're pulling up to the hotel, you could say something like, "Thank you so much for the ride and the interesting conversation. It's been a great introduction to London."
That's a nice way to acknowledge the driver's role in making the journey enjoyable. It shows that you appreciate their time and effort.
And the driver might respond with, "You're very welcome. Enjoy your stay in London." It's a simple exchange, but it leaves both parties feeling good.
I have to say, I'm starting to see the magic in those taxi conversations. They're more than just about getting from point A to point B. They're about connecting with people, sharing experiences, and maybe even gaining a new perspective.
Precisely. And the best part is these conversational skills aren't limited to taxis. You can apply them to any situation where you're interacting with new people in English.
That's so true. Now, I know we've been peppering in some interesting vocabulary throughout this deep dive. Would it be helpful to take a quick detour and unpack some of those key phrases and terms.
Absolutely. Let's delve into the vocabulary toolkit that will make your taxi conversations even more engaging and fluent.
Okay, so for all our word nerds out there, let's get our vocabulary engines revved up. What are some of those like must-know terms that will make us sound like, seasoned taxi conversationalists?
Well, first off, knowing some common slang terms can really add color to your chats.
Okay.
Remember the driver's greeting, "Afternoon, Governor"?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a classic London term.
Right, and it instantly gave the conversation that more like authentic local feel.
Yeah.
What are some other, I guess, British slang terms our listeners might encounter?
You might hear cheer used instead of thank you,
Oh, okay.
or quid instead of pounds when talking about money.
Yeah.
And if the driver says Bob's your uncle, it simply means you're all set or no problem.
Oh, I like that one. Okay, these are great. I can already picture myself like casually dropping a cheers or a Bob's your uncle into my next taxi ride.
Right.
It's those little touches that make you feel more like a local and less like a tourist.
Exactly. Now let's talk directions. It's helpful to be familiar with words like roundabout, junction, and dual carriageway, which are common in British English.
Those are good ones. I remember being so confused the first time I heard roundabout.
Yeah.
I was picturing a carousel.
It happens.
Yeah.
And speaking of directions, if you're unsure of the route, don't hesitate to ask the driver for clarification. You could say, "Could you point me in the right direction?" Or, "Is this the quickest way?"
Okay, those are great phrases to have in your back pocket.
Yeah,
It shows you're engaged in the journey, not just passively along for the ride.
right.
Now, what about vocabulary related to paying for the fare? Are there any British English terms we should know?
Yes. When it's time to settle up, you might hear the driver say, "That'll be 8 quid, please."
Okay.
And if you want a receipt, you can simply ask for a receipt or a chit, which is another informal term.
So many new words to add to my taxi talk repertoire.
Yeah.
But beyond like specific terms, are there any general tips for, I guess, improving our overall English vocabulary?
Absolutely. One of the best ways to expand your vocabulary is simply to expose yourself to as much English as possible. Read books, watch movies, listen to podcasts.
Right.
Immerse yourself in the language.
I second that. And don't be afraid to use a dictionary or like online resources to look up new words.
Yeah.
The more you engage with the language, the more it'll become second nature.
Absolutely.
You know what?
But,
Here's a little challenge for our listeners.
okay.
Next time you're in a taxi, make a conscious effort to use at least one new word or phrase that you've learned.
Oh, I love that.
It's a fun way to bring your knowledge into practice and build your confidence.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to wrap up our deep dives into taxi talk,
Yep.
what are some key takeaways we want our listeners to remember?
First and foremost, remember that those seemingly small taxi conversations are valuable opportunities to practice your English, learn about a new culture, and connect with people. Don't be afraid to strike up a chat, even if it's just a few simple exchanges.
Yeah, it's about embracing those moments of connection, however fleeting they may be.
Yeah.
And remember, a friendly smile and a genuine interest in the other person can go a long way. So next time you find yourself in the back of a taxi, take a deep breath, put those conversational skills to the test, and enjoy the ride.
That's right. Have a good time.
And who knows, you might even pick up some fascinating local insights or make a new friend along the way. Happy chatting, everyone.